So welcome to the discussion on KCS Adoption and Success. This is the first conversation in 2015 we've had on this topic, and it is the result of a member survey that we did last month around member interests. And one of the things that showed up quite strongly was creating more opportunities to talk about KCS adoption and success. To share what we've collected and know about the process of adopting, maximizing, and sustaining benefits, and also to give some of the members an opportunity to interact on challenges or questions they might have. So we've scheduled a number of events through this year. I'll talk some more about that are focused on KCS adoption and success to enable that conversation. So here's the agenda. A few words of welcome, an overview on the 5 initiatives. So we've kind of loosely organized our work into 5 different initiatives, and I'll briefly describe those. And then how the KCS adoption and success activities fit into that. A review of the KCS resources. So quite often we find people aren't aware of many of the resources that are available to support adoption and maximizing benefits and sustaining success. So we'll take a look at those, and in particular, a matrix that we've had as a result of 2 team meeting discussions over the last couple of years, but never published anywhere but the wiki, which is available only to the members. So we've put a version of that up on the resources page, and we'll take a look at that. I think that's a good sort of starting point for these conversations. And then a little update on the Academy, and hopefully we'll have a fair amount of time, 15 or 20 minutes at the end, for just if people have questions about or challenges you're facing with adoption, and we'll have some discussion time. That's the plan. So the 5 initiatives, KCS, which is our most mature and oldest. Mature from the consortium's point of view. I'm not so sure it's mature from an industry point of view yet. It's probably still ramping up the curve of adoption. And we're defining that initiative now as having 2 key pieces. One is the success, adoption success, and sustaining the benefits, which is the focus of this call. And the second is the evolution of KCS, which is a conversation we've been having over the past 18 months, really looking at making KCS generic and updating some of the practices and things. So KCS is about the capture and reuse of knowledge and integrating that into the workflow, whereas intelligence forming is about collaboration between people. So KCS focuses on the content, and intelligence forming focuses on the people. We used to say some years ago that in order to do intelligence forming, you had to do KCS first. So intelligence forming is collaboration on steroids. It's an idea we've been talking about for about 12 years. We've been dreaming about it for 12 years, and it's only been in the last 3 or 4 years where we've actually had a couple of members doing it and producing much better results than we ever dreamed about. But it's all about doing away with the linear escalation model, level 1, level 2, level 3, and moving to a collaboration model where people collaborate on problem solving, which support analysts and support engineers do quite naturally, but they often do it in spite of our practices and how we measure them and our processes and escalation rules. So intelligence forming is really about how do we facilitate a process that the support engineers actually do quite naturally. But it's all about people and collaboration. Communities, social networks, and support is the 3rd initiative, and that's been around for a couple of years now, where we're talking about the intersection of online communities and social networks and support. And we've developed 3 tenets, sort of guiding principles for how you think about that, and a maturity matrix that talks about certain activities and certain categories that can help be kind of a roadmap of assessing where you are today and what you might want to consider doing next. It has 5 stages of maturity. The fourth one is Customer Success Initiative. This is perhaps our newest initiative in terms of age, our youngest initiative. We've been looking quite a bit at the role support can play in understanding and the process of continuous improvement for the customer experience and customer success. And one of the subtopics there that's gotten a lot of traction and interest from the members is the idea of predictive customer engagement, which is how do we tell customers about stuff we know in support that they would value but don't know to ask us for. And so the key to that is really providing relevant information at the right point in time and achieving that delicate balance between being helpful versus being annoying. So then the fifth initiative is the Leadership Framework for Service Excellence. This has been a conversation we've had at the Executive Summit with our Board of Directors and in the Leadership Committee meeting for probably 5 to 7 years now. Looking at how do you influence a network. Our view of the future of support is that it functions more like a network than a hierarchy, and that many of the players adding value in that network aren't necessarily employed by the company. So it includes social media, online communities, self-service, all the players that are relevant independent of who employs them or what their role is. And the leadership principles around organizing, facilitating, nurturing, and leading a network are quite different than the traditional model of a hierarchical command and control kind of approach, which has been with us for 100 years. So we've been talking quite a bit about what's different there. A really good conversation just recently at the last Executive Summit was all around designing business models, business processes from the point of view of trust, not from the point of view of mistrust, which is actually when we look at how we design business processes, a lot of it is based on catering to the weakest in the organization and essentially not trusting people to make good judgments and good decisions. But what if we did it the other way around? So those are the 5 initiatives. Let's see, we now have 18 people on the phone, so again, welcome. So our focus on this call is the first of a number of events around KCS Adoption and Success. And so I thought we'd see if I can get the advance. So first, a little bit about the two pieces of the KCS initiative. One is this idea of really leveraging what we've learned about how to be successful with KCS, which is much more pragmatic and operational. And then the second piece is the evolution and making KCS generic. So the fundamental simple idea that started some 20 years ago was, what if we captured, structured, and reused the experience of support agents have in supporting customers? And the theme was, can we integrate the reuse, improvement, or creation, if it doesn't exist, of knowledge into the case management, into the problem-solving process? So what we're finding is that KCS is being embraced by financial services and HR and different functions outside of technical support. And so rewriting the practices to talk about integrating the creation and maintenance of knowledge into the workflow in environments that do not have cases or incidents. So talking about improve and create knowledge as a byproduct of interaction rather than as a byproduct of a case. So that's been work that's been going on for about the last 18 months, and we're making progress on defining the KCS principles, core concepts, practices, and techniques in a way that's generic. So that's a separate conversation from how do you adopt it and how do you maximize the benefits. So a few things we're planning this year on Adoption and Success. There'll be a face-to-face team meeting that's 2.5 days in April, hosted by the Apollo Group, which is the organization that essentially runs the University of Phoenix, or Phoenix University, I guess. which is mastered this distance learning, and they have also adopted KCS in many different functions within the Apollo group. So they're a great host for a conversation around KCS. And then a team meeting in June in Europe. So this too is the first time we've run a team meeting in Europe, but a number of the members have said they'd love to have some of their European organizations participate in some of these conversations firsthand. So in June, we think it'll be June 25, 26. The date's still a little bit fluid, but sometime that week in June, a Europe team meeting, also focused on KCS. And then on the event calendar, we have a number of web sessions that we've set up. It will be follow-on conversations to this one. So a few observations we have about, what is it that creates KCS success? What drives the benefits? Whether you're initially adopting or long-term. And the benefits that we talk about really fit into three categories. And it's the operational efficiency. So as organizations first start to embrace KCS and integrate use of the knowledge base into the problem-solving process, the support engineers, support agents, realize much faster that they're working on something that has already been solved or already answered. And that fairly quickly creates some operational efficiency. The second benefit is self-service success. So the first one, operational efficiency, happens within 3 to 9 months of a team embracing the KCS concepts. The second one, which is much bigger in size in terms of the impact of the benefit, is self-service success. And that usually happens 9 to 18 months on the KCS journey. And that is the degree to which you can make most of what you have learned in supporting customers available to customers quickly. And we have a rather provocative statement about 90-90. 90% of what the organization knows should be available to customers within 90 minutes. I think right now there's probably only one organization, Avaya, that is at that level of speed in terms of time to publish. But many others are 70% in 12 hours, which is much better than 30% in 45 days, which is where the organizations were before they started the KCS journey. So self-service success can be quite profound, particularly if the organization is focused on customer experience and success, because through self-service we serve a demand that we never saw as part of the case volume. So it has benefits in it. You're solving some things that used to come in as cases through self-service, but you're also solving, in our data shows 5 to 10 times as many issues that customers never would have called you about, but they will spend a little bit of time on a good self-service portal or self-service mechanism finding that answer. So huge benefit for self-service success. It comes a little later on the journey. And then the last one, which is also huge and perhaps the hardest to get to, is improved products and services. So the patterns and trends that emerge in the knowledge base as people reuse content and link, and of course this is dependent on linking rates being reasonable. They don't have to be 100%, but they have to be somewhere between 50 and 80% linking rates. What's more important though is linking accuracy. If the linking accuracy isn't 80% or better, then the whole act of linking is really kind of useless, because you can't make any decisions when the linking accuracy is weak or low. But assuming you've got some good linking practices, and you've got a statistically significant sample of accurately linked articles to cases, it's quite telling in terms of the customer experience and what's driving the disruption to that customer experience. Some of the members are actually starting to analyze web activities, because the patterns of reuse on the web are different than they are internally to the support organization. And so to really identify the potential improvements, and we say products, but it could be improvements in products, process, services, and the one that was a little bit surprising is policy. As we look at to understand what drives customer disruption, it's a surprising number of policy issues that are frustrating for customers. So it's really improving all of those. And that happens 18 to 36 months into the journey. So those are the benefits. They're quite compelling, and we continue to get stronger and stronger evidence of each one of these. So the observation we would make is that what drives every one of those benefits is the solve loop. And in KCS, we talk about the solve loop is what the support analysts or support engineers do as they handle cases or incidents, as they're answering customer questions and solving customer problems. They're using the knowledge base, and it has to become a habit. It has to be the first point of resource that they use, even if they think they know the answer. And the extent to which they use it, the extent to which they do the solve loop, capture, structure, reuse, and improve as they're handling cases is what drives every one of these benefits. So the frequency with which they do it and the accuracy or completeness with which they do it is what creates these benefits. So the evolve loop is, which is the sort of the organizational and reflective part of the model, leverages the activities and events that happen in the solve loop. But if people aren't following the solve loop and doing the problem-solving process using the knowledge base, searching early, searching often, searching is creating, linking, and linking accurately, and improving, then the benefits are minimized. So what drives these behaviors? Well, there are three things that really stand out as key drivers. One is leadership. So being able to articulate the what's in it for me for the support analysts, because if they do it well, it will improve the quality of life for them. The nature of the work they do gets more interesting. Communication is a huge challenge that leadership faces. Leadership also has to change the measurement system in terms of how they assess people's contribution. It has to change the culture of the organization to be more collaborative rather than hoarding knowledge or valuing people for what they know. Leadership has to value people for their ability to learn and contribute to the knowledge base and collaborate. And these things are easy to say. They're much more difficult to do. It really challenges organizations' ability or capacity to deal with change. So leadership, huge factor, and communication is a big, big piece of that. Coaching, and we're seeing, in the 15 years or so that we've been working with members on adopting KCS, we have yet to see an environment that was successful in changing the analyst behaviors to make capture, structure, reuse, improve habit without a coaching model. Coaching is, whatever you invest in coaching will directly relate to what you realize in benefits. And we used to say some time ago that the coaching demand diminishes over time, and what we're finding is in order to sustain KCS, you really need to sustain a focus on coaching. It might diminish somewhat, but it certainly doesn't diminish to the level that we used to talk about it as kind of going away after people learned how to do it. And then the last one is understanding and certification, which internally people use the licensing model to acknowledge people's mastery of certain proficiencies around capture, structure, reuse, and improve. And more recently, some of the members have been using the KCS Academy certification programs, which is an independent assessment of people's understanding of KCS. And it is proving to be a very good test of a thorough understanding of KCS. And when people understand why they're doing it, they're more likely to do it more often, and they're more likely to do it with a higher level of accuracy. So those are the three key drivers: leadership, coaching, and understanding certification. So the resources that are available to help with that model, help adopt, maximize the benefits, and sustain them over time, are on the KCS resources page on the KCS Academy site. And we're going to just go take a quick look at that. well, maybe not so quick, but it seems to be coming up slowly here. So if you haven't visited the kcsacademy.net, this is where all the information is about what is KCS, the KCS resources, the certification programs, how we do KCS Verified, which is for tools. Our certified trainers list their workshops here. So we'll go to the What is KCS and look at the KCS resources page. Most everything the consortium does is right to use with attribution in terms of intellectual property rights. So all of these things are available to anyone. You don't have to be a member to access these things, and you're welcome to print, distribute, reference, and the only thing we ask is that you attribute it back to the Consortium for Service Innovation. So the Practices Guide, which is 180 pages of everything we know about how to do it. The KCS Adoption Guide, which hasn't been around as long as the Practices Guide, but it talks about the 4 phases of adoption and what you do during design, and what you do during a pilot or phase 2, and then how you build proficiency, and then finally phase 4, which is when you start to leverage the knowledge base with self-service and driving product and service improvements. So the new addition to this page, so each one of these are links to the documents, and you can download those, print them, and distribute them. And the new addition to the page is let me finish the list here first. So the adoption guide, the sustaining metrics, we're going to take a look at that because I think it's a good overview of how to implement and sustain KCS. Measurement Matters talks about how you have to change your measures as you go along the journey. The KCS Continuum is a maturity model for that identifies in the phases sort of attributes or characteristics of some of your practices. There's a PowerPoint, there's some thoughts on taxonomy, there's some information about radar charts, which we find are an important part of transforming or transitioning your measurements from being activity-based to being value-based. There's the metrics matrix, which is all the measurements we've defined, which is a bit overwhelming. So one-page reference guide for your last questions. Then over on the right side here, there are case studies, some other papers and presentations, and some information about certification. So let's look at the sustaining, adopting and sustaining KCS matrix. And do I need to enlarge this a bit? Let's see how big I can make it. Is that easier to read? So we don't really have time to go through all the cells. It's a 4x4 matrix there, so there's 16 cells with a fair amount of detail in each one. What we've done is identified the audiences down the right side, so executives, managers, support analysts or engineers, and then product management and development as some of the key stakeholders. And then for each one of those audiences, we talk about what kinds of things have to happen in phase 1, which is the planning phase, and phase 2, which is adopting, and 3, proficiency, and then 4, in leverage. And I think the challenge, so the adoption guide talks a lot about phase 1 and planning, and how you have recommendations on how to get, what are the steps you need to do to really get the thing started. What this matrix does that I don't think exists anywhere else is phase 4. The observation, the reason we built this was because people were getting stuck in phase 3 and not moving to phase 4. And you can't sustain KCS if you don't get to phase 4. You can't just go halfway and then say, well, this is good enough, we're going to stay here. It will atrophy. The benefits will become diluted over time if you don't get to phase 4. So phase 4 is pretty critical, but we saw people getting kind of stuck in phase 3, and so or moving to phase 4, and then it still would kind of fade off. And I think one of the key, so the number of things you need to do for each audience in phase 4 in order to sustain focus. I think one of the key things is this, particularly for the support analysts or engineers, and again, this is because all the benefits are driven by the solve loop. It's the support engineer's behaviors that really drive or create and drive the benefits. So if those behaviors start to wane or stray from what they need to be, then the benefits start to diminish. So one of the key questions is in phase 4, over time, how do you sustain this focus? And I think a couple of the practices that we've learned from the members, although challenging, prove effective, and that is you have to give the support engineers, the support agents, visibility to the impact that their contribution is having. And this is hard to do, but there are ways, people have figured out ways to do it. So for example, success with self-service is a hard thing to measure. It really takes a pretty sophisticated measurement system to assess customer success with self-service. But making that success visible and the trend visible is extremely important in retaining the support analyst's interest or focus in doing the solve loop. Reuse reports are very popular. Support engineers love to look at who's reusing content, and the extent to which you can approximate reuse on self-service, that becomes even more powerful because the activity in self-service is, again, anywhere from 5 to 10 times the number of cases you're getting. So most support engineers and analysts love to see that other people are benefiting from what they've contributed, and that gives them a sense of accomplishment, and they feel good about it, and that's what will keep them doing the work. We've also had numerous conversations about how to do a better job with gamification, as much as I hate that term, but leveraging behavioral science to understand how to recognize people for certain competencies and proficiencies and for certain contributions through a badging model, and the KCS licensing model is kind of a crude version of a badging model, but I think we could do. Avaya does it at a much more granular level. They have their five-step proficiency model, and recognizing people as they move up the steps, and their measurements change as they move up the steps. So there's a bunch of good stuff in here in the matrix for each audience in terms of what you need to focus on, and we're constantly updating this based on the member experience. So that was the extent of what I wanted to cover there. Let's see, back to this. Okay, so that's the sustaining matrix. So the KCS Academy, again, we're finding that when people truly understand, particularly the support engineers and support agents, how the whole system works, how the whole KCS system or practices work, and the benefits to them, they're much more likely to do it. So there's a number of different certification programs available. KCS Practices V5 is, we're going to rename that here shortly to be, I can never remember, the KCS Master or KCS Expert. I think it's KCS Master. We've made the support certification generic, so it's not just about KCS, because it turns out you need coaches when you do swarming, and there are other things that coaching skills can be very helpful in a support organization. So we've removed the KCS context from the coach program, and it's now a support coach. So it's all about influence skills, and those skills can be applied in many different contexts. And then we have a KCS trainer certification where the trainers license the materials from the consortium, and we go through a validation process. There's some trainers that are internal for their company only, and there are others that are external. So a quick update on the Academy. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of the consortium. The consortium owns all the intellectual property, and so the Academy pays royalties back to the consortium for certification activities. We certify people. We have a program called KCS Verified for Tools. That's for knowledge management tools that support KCS. And then we have a KCS Aligned program, which hasn't been too active but is getting more active, and that's for complementary tools and services. So if you're doing KCS, we've we've reviewed some services or tools that in fact would help you be successful with KCS, but they don't have all the functionality you need to do KCS. So that's what the Aligned is about. We have about a little more than 400 people certified, over 1,000 people registered in the credential management system. And I've already mentioned the coach program going generic. So I will stop there and open it up to questions. And again, if you use the chat window, if there's a little arrow in your control panel, the little arrows by the chat and the webcam, you can expand that chat window and type in there. I think one thing we would be interested in is for future conference calls on KCS Success, what are some of the challenges you face or are facing in adopting or sustaining KCS? Because that should define what our agenda is for the future phone calls and for the team meeting in April. So we'd love to hear what challenges you're dealing with. And it seems there aren't any. Oh, there's one. How are people measuring the 10x factor? So the 10x factor, for those who might not know, is we have the model, the nearly famous funnel and cloud model, where the cloud represents the customer experience, and there are three pieces. There's assisted, self-service, and community and social. And the assisted model is when people open a case or an incident. The self-service is all that activity they do with whatever your self-service mechanisms are. And the data we've seen from about 5 or 6 different companies in different industries is that the activity on the self-service portal, if it's well designed, if there's good content is in the customer's context, if it's their time, if most of what we know is out there quickly, and if you do some marketing around it, those are the 4 key. Enablers to self-service success. That the activity on self-service is 10 times that of what you see in your case volume. And the way people measure that varies a bit. There is no exact or precise way. You have to make some assumptions. The simplest way that people have used is to understand your user's behavior in terms of, in a session, how many articles do they look at? How many searches do they do? How many articles do they look at? And the general assumption is that for each session, a person will do 3 searches and look at up to 3 articles. And so if you just look at your page views, you could divide by 3 if you make that assumption. And that would equate to an event or what would have been a case, but isn't a case because they're working on self-service. Others do clickstream analysis, which is more sophisticated. Some do both, sort of activity tracking, page views, time on page, whether or not they downloaded, and whether or not they opened a case within 12 hours of their web session. So if they opened a case within some time frame of the web session, then it probably was unsuccessful. So the trick with assessing web success is understanding what are the indicators that will allow you to approximate how many issues are being pursued and how many are being successful. And I think that the number isn't as important as the trend, because the trends are what's really interesting. So that's anybody else on the phone have experience with how you measure self-service success? Do you want to add anything to that? Okay, well, if you have some additional information, either unmute yourself or type it in the chat window. So another question here is, how do you adopt KCS with no additional headcount? I'm not aware of anybody that's gotten additional headcount to adopt KCS. In fact, there are a few rather sad stories where they actually lost headcount and adopted KCS in order to maintain their service levels. To the best of my knowledge, nobody's gotten incremental headcount. They've all figured out how to do it with their existing resources. And this is where I think leadership, again, comes into play as a really critical enabler. Recognizing the long-term benefit. So there is a little blip in as you do the coaching and training and get people up to speed through the licensing models or whatever your proficiency model is. There is a resource impact. What we've seen is that it generally does not impact service levels. So some of the leaders have said, this is very important, and for this team, we're going to relax your service levels for the next 2 months while you learn how to do KCS. We're going to invest in coaching. We're going to enable people to spend time coaching. We're going to enable you to spend time with a coach, and we're not going to beat you up about your response to queue or average handle time or some of those traditional transaction-based measures. It's a very strong statement of commitment from the executives. The good news is we seldom see a dip in the service levels. So the organization invests in coaching, they take the time to do it, and the service levels seldom actually reflect any decline. And then once people learn to do it, there's a tremendous upside in terms of increased capacity, and all the benefits start to come into play. So some teams get excited about it and figure out how to, because they recognize the value it creates for them, the support engineers themselves, and they figure out how to support their peers with a coach, somebody spending some of their time on coaching. And so it's probably one of the biggest challenges in adopting is finding the resources to invest in coaching and learning. But the good news is that it shouldn't take more than 6 to 8, 12 weeks at the most for people to really learn how to do the solve loop. Let's see. I'd like to know more about Avaya's 5 levels of KCS proficiency. Well, so would we.
Unmuted.
Russ Brooks at Avaya is the KCS program manager there, and he's shared some of that with us. It's in the wiki, which is available to members. And Russ is going to be with us at the Member Summit in a few weeks in San Diego, and actually presenting a session on Avaya's KCS adoption. They've broken it down. Let me see here. If I can quickly, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Oh, here's some information about, sorry, here's some information about the upcoming Member Summit. The theme is Collaboration Launchpad, and we'll be talking about intelligence forming as well as KCS, collaborating around content and collaborating between people. And Russ Brooks is on the agenda for that. But let me see. I had, oh, so here's what Russ presented at a recent team meeting. These are the 5. This is their proficiency path. So they start with transaction proficiency, then KCS participation. Oops, sorry. Trying to minimize this. Linking behaviors. Then they work on search, and it is interesting that we have to teach people how to search in a KCS environment because fundamentally because Google has ruined us. The average number of search words put into a Google session is 1.5, and none of us have the volume that Google has to drive the algorithms that they use to help that be successful. So when you have a knowledge-based, then you build it in a KCS fashion, the more context you give the search engine, the more likely you are to find something that's relevant. But when people think about searching, they think about the Google experience, and they tend to put in very cryptic and not very much context. So teaching people how to search is, it turns out, as funny as that sounds, is an important part of the proficiency ladder for Avaya. So how to search in their environment, which often means that, again, the more, if you use 5 to 7 words in your search arguments, then you're more likely to find something that's relevant. Then they move on to capture and create, and then modify, and then, it's actually 6 levels. And then when they've got them all, they're at the master level. And what's interesting is once they've mastered a proficiency, then they move up the staircase and their measurements change. The coaches begin to work with them on the next thing, and they're focused on a different set of measures. So the measurement system is extremely dynamic in that it flows and changes as they move up the proficiency path. So hopefully that's a little more information on that. Let's see, where was I? 5 levels. Handle time might increase if more time is required to avoid dispatch. So I'm not quite sure what the avoiding dispatch means. Quite often when people talk about handle time, their perception is that because before KCS, people were not creating and modifying content, and after you start doing KCS, they are creating and modifying content, and that the handle time therefore must increase, which actually is false. That's a myth. It will increase for a brief period of time as people learn to do this, but after they learn to do it and it becomes a habit, they actually do it in the same amount of time or less time than it used to take them when they weren't doing the create or the modify. 2 factors in that I think are important to understand. One is that you're not creating for every case. After you get started, you're linking more often than creating, and hopefully modifying occasionally. But the words and phrases people use to search, if search becomes a habit, and they search even if they think they know the answer just to find out what is collectively known about that issue, the words and phrases they use to search are actually content to improve an existing article or to create a new one. So if they're searching, they're already doing a lot of the work, if you will, or writing down what should be part of a new article or improve an existing. Secondly, in all the support organizations I've ever been in, when I ask people about what do you do when you get a new problem, what are the first few things you do to solve a new problem? Inevitably they say, I talk to my peers, so they collaborate, which is what swarming looks to improve. And secondly, they start taking notes. And I have seen notes in Word documents, notes in Excel spreadsheets, department level wikis, SharePoint files, notebooks in people's drawers. But in any moderate to complex environment, when people encounter something new, they start taking notes. So they're already doing the work. We're not asking them to do something they aren't already doing. What we want them to do is to do it in a way that's structured and shareable. And so it's not that we're asking them to do incremental work, we're asking them to do it in a different way. And once they learn how to do it, they will do it faster than they used to do it. So this idea of create and modify, it's already built into the work they're doing. They're just not doing it in a structured and reusable way. And the extent to which they search the knowledge base as a habit, searching is creating. The words and phrases they use to search are candidate content. So there isn't an increase in handle time unless you believe there will be. Because if you believe there will be, then there will be. But if you believe that it can be done in the same or less handle time once people learn to do it. So I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure about the avoiding dispatch. I would think the things you did to avoid a dispatch before KCS would be the same or less than what you would do using a knowledge base to avoid a dispatch. Because the knowledge base should help you identify the appropriateness or inappropriateness of dispatching of, I assume that's a field person.
Yeah, I guess where my thought process there was there might be additional ownership at the call center level to assess whether or not a dispatch is required, and depending upon the maturity before, it may have been such a focus on handle time that
Yeah.
that was more important than avoiding a dispatch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a couple interesting dynamics there, right, in terms of where people are coming from, or where they're starting, I guess, on the journey. So most of the groups that deal with field service, though, are pretty sensitive to the fact that a dispatch is, 5 times the cost of solving it through the support center. But hopefully that helps. Okay, here's a long question. My company has a very active community where internal developers, internal consultants, past and present customers blog and do QA, and on a Stack exchange outside of the internal wiki, external. Are there any ad hoc suggestions on how to harmonize centralized KB driven by support? That's a great question. So I think if I can paraphrase this, is how do you merge or coordinate, at least if not merge, social, community, blogs, kind of public crowdsourced information with the knowledge base that is being created as a result of handling cases. And we have for years talked about the convergence of these two collections of knowledge. And we just, not too long ago, posted a case study from MathWorks on the website. That MathWorks is a small scientific software that helps people who do a lot of math, as the name would imply. And they have merged their online community, their customer community, with their support knowledge base. So they have one repository, they have one template or format. The customers are very active in updating and contributing and using, as is the support organization. They do distinguish the content that comes from the support team versus the content that's crowdsourced or community generated. But it all looks and feels the same, and a tremendous amount of transparency. And the thing that I find a bit humorous about the MathWorks story is that they were doing KCS for a number of years and very proud of the content they were creating through the KCS model. And when they merged these two repositories, their community with their support knowledge base, they allowed, as a result of that, allowed customers to comment on knowledge articles that were from the support team, which they hadn't done in the past. And they were surprised to learn that the customers weren't quite as enamored with the support content from the support team, with the articles from the support team, as the support team was. And in fact, customers made some pretty significant improvements and contributions. And what really, I think, prompted the level of activity was that it was visible to everybody. So if a customer made a comment on an article, other customers could see it and comment on it as well. And it's that visibility that really helps draw people into contributing. When people put comments on articles and then they disappear and they never hear back and it kind of goes into a black hole, the likelihood they'll ever do that again is about 0. And so we find in most support knowledge bases that are customer viewable, the customers can't see each other's comments or ratings or anything on that content. And so I think it minimizes the customer's willingness to contribute in that way. I think this is still very much a frontier. I think it's a huge opportunity to figure out how to converge or coordinate crowdsourced material with support-generated material. But
So,
look at the MathWorks case study.
jump in here for a moment.
Sure.
Melissa, George, and I were in Austin in January at a meeting talking about much of this topic, and we came up with sort of 4 things in terms of managing multiple sources of content. And so the notes, again, from this meeting are on the wiki for members who are interested. But The first thing that you should do is get federated search. So some way that you can search multiple repositories is an excellent first step. Avoiding duplication should be the goal. So linking when applicable based on business processes and goals. Identifying content that might add value for other parts of the business is a big deal. So National Instruments went through an exercise where they categorized all of their types of content, and then they have like an insane number of types of content, much like Terry's mentioning here, right? Blogs and Q&As and all kinds of places. And then they assigned each of those types of content a gold, silver, or bronze level value. So they interact with their gold level content types differently than they do their bronze. It gives them a way to prioritize what they're going to do with what. And then we came up with a list of kind of ways in which you might use those levels to sort of prioritize or your engagement. So maybe it's number of views, or it's via nomination, or it's via activity, or it's the quality, or it's the audience, or it's the age, or it's the liveliness, and using sort of some of those ways of evaluating the content lets you figure out what content you might want to repurpose. Maybe you might want to put a version of something like it in the knowledge base, even while you're trying to avoid duplication. Maybe you want to take a knowledge base article and write a blog post about it. Sort of managing those relationships is, as we know, a big deal.
So can you summarize those 4 points?
Get federated search, avoid duplication, identify content that might add value, and then the fourth one is sort of the collection of ways that you might identify it.
Oh, okay.
So the third one is you got to see who you're adding value for, right? Customers, other parts of the business, root cause, onboarding, marketing, those kinds of things. So.
And one of the things we've known for years, but not many of the members have done, is customers want to know how confident we are in content. To the point of how valuable is the content, or how accurate, or what's people's experience with it. And that's pretty visible in online communities, but in most self-service knowledge bases, there is no reflection of people's experience with articles or our confidence in it. And I think that's a huge opportunity and necessary to really ever create this convergence between crowdsourced and support content. So here's another question. So hopefully that helps. Going beyond support, there are challenges around getting field personnel to embrace knowledge reuse contributions. What are the next steps to drive KCS into the field, fit their unique workflow and process? So you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the challenge with field force who are mobile. One key question is, are they persistently connected? And many of them are not. If there's people who work in secure sites, and all kinds of examples of where they are not persistently connected, which makes it difficult. So that has some technology implications. But the key is actually, I think, in your question, is understanding their workflow and figuring out how do you integrate that in. Getting field force to comment or improve an article is more difficult for a number of reasons than getting people in the support organization, in the support center, to update. In part because of the mobile nature of where and how they work, and whether or not they're actually have the connectivity to make comments or improvements or capture their experience. I don't know of any silver bullet for this. KCS practices in a field force have to be different because the workflow is different. So you can't impose on them the support center practices because they just aren't relevant for the field. So I think there's an opportunity for some creative work in this area.